What do the Russian-Ukrainian war, the upcoming combustion engine ban, and planned obsolescence all have in common? They're all pushing automakers to redesign their cars faster than ever. If you think that's a good thing, well, actually, it's not. Today, we're looking at why car makers are accelerating their combustion engine redesigns before the ban kicks in. And be sure to stay to the end where I expose why these new redesigned models are nowhere near as perfect as you might think. Turn on any news feed today and you can't avoid hearing about the conflict in Eastern Europe. Even though it's less than 6,000 miles away, it's especially impacting the U.S. car industry. But let's rewind a bit. Even before the conflict started, there was another major event in the works, and that's the upcoming ban on sales of new internal combustion engine cars. Target is 2035, and some states are shooting for 2030. That's just 8 years away. It'll be here before you know it. Of course, some experts believe this will only accelerate Europe's ban on combustion engine cars. Here's why. Till recently, over 2/3 of all crude oil imported by the European Union has been sourced from Russia. That's equal to around hundreds of billions of dollars every single year. But they don't want to be dependent on Russian gas. So how do you solve this? One solution is moving up the ban on sales of new gas cars. Sounds like a simple solution, but it's not. Actually, there are some big hurdles to overcome before the EU can even consider implementing it. For example, there are disputes over EV batteries. Those disputes appear to have been recently settled and supposedly will make EU batteries the greenest in the world and the most recyclable. That's because the EU plans to recover around 90% of the nickel, copper, and cobalt used in the batteries, as well as 70% of the lithium. No one knows what happens to the other 30%. And recovering the lithium brings in an extra bonus to the EU because Russia is a lithium producer. Did you know that there's actually quite a few European countries taking the steps to go greener sooner? Like the French President Emmanuel Macron, who announced a plan for the new government-backed lease-to-own program that'll make it easier for middle-class consumers to go electric. And just look at car companies in the EU. Ford is planning on releasing 3 new electric passenger vehicles for consumers in Europe within the next 2 years. And they intend to sell a massive 600,000 electric vehicles a year to EU countries by 2026. Or look at Tesla. In the fourth quarter of 2021 alone, Tesla sold 309,000 EVs. And in Europe, for that same quarter, Tesla outsold every diesel vehicle for the first time ever. Believe it or not. Anyway, the EU does move up the combustion engine ban. Who's to say the US won't follow? Let's tie this back to car redesigns. Typically, new cars get fully redesigned about every 5 to 7 years. It depends on the automaker and the vehicle segment. A car ad may say all new every year, but sometimes it isn't really all that different from the year before, other than minor touch-ups or a facelift. Officially, an all-new car means the launch of a debut model that's never been built before, or in some cases, a model that's being reintroduced after some hiatus, like the Toyota Supra, for example. In some cases, all new models might share some major components with an existing model. That would apply to vehicles like the Cadillac XT6 and the GMC Acadia. Now, in between the redesigns, vehicles get facelifts. That's usually around every 3 years to keep them looking fresh. There's an unwritten rule in the car industry. If sales are strong, don't make major significant changes. After all, why fix what's not broken? Instead, just perform minor tweaks. Think of things like updating headlights, new bumpers, new exterior colors, tech gadgets, wheel designs. Facelifts can even include things like adding on more safety technology, like pedestrian detection systems. Once you update a few things, all left to do is generate marketing hype for the new model year. This cycle is known as the automotive model cycle. Did you know that virtually every car company has automotive model cycles except one? And that's Tesla. Tesla doesn't strictly use model years. Instead, they just update their cars on the fly. In other words, continuous improvement. Originally, they tied a car's year to the calendar build date. That changed October 2019. That's when they released the 2020 M3, and they used the model year rather than the manufacturer year. The changes were mostly superficial, though, mostly with the trunk and front carpets and slight changes to reduce noise. Let's talk about EV redesigns. EVs have a lot fewer components than traditional combustion engine vehicles, and in some cases they can require a bit less time to manufacture. But it all really depends on the vehicle. And here's why it's important to know all this. This impacts how much money you'll pay for your new car and how much money you'll save. If you understand when your target car was last updated, or if you hear news that the next release will be a major update, then you know if you should get the current model or hang tight and wait for a future release. Have you noticed that recent car redesigns have been coming out sooner than normal? Now, when it comes to designs, there are many steps to the process. It starts with concept sketches and renders. Usually these are simple sketches by a single designer with an idea. The designer's sketch can be based on pretty much any inspiration, from a personal idea to a wide call for designs from company studios. In some cases, it can even come from a freelance designer who pitches their concept to a car company. Did you know that thousands of designs get submitted to an auto manufacturer every single year? Yet out of the thousands, usually one or two may eventually make it to the showroom floor. Fast forward about 10 steps later and you get the final step in the design process, completing a first engineering and production concept. After this, production officially begins. Specialized engineers make final adjustments to the design, so it can enter production faster and cost less money to produce. I'm talking about changes to things like how individual parts are put together and more. The final production process for the vehicle is then laid out and planned. Funny enough, normally the original concept and the final production of a model are often two very different looking vehicles. Now, most car designers take anywhere from 3 to 5 years from the initial concept to final consumer-ready production units. There is no single concrete timeline when it comes to car design. Every vehicle is different. Some very advanced car concepts can even take decades to complete. But the idea of decades-long car redesign process is generally rare. And in recent times, the period of redesigning has been shorter and shorter. If you're wondering why, here's the thing. Part of it has to do with the upcoming ban on new combustion engine cars. The combustion engine car ban is inevitable, and EVs are the new it cars. It's logical that car companies want to invest where the money's at. Many early EV designs just used existing platforms and arranged electric powertrains to fit in where gas engines and transmissions were positioned previously, like Tesla's first attempt, for example. Pretty much, it was a revamped Lotus Elise without its 1.8-liter inline-4. But designing EVs like this limited the car makers' options for where they could position the battery and motor. In the past, many automakers often stacked the battery under the rear seat. Actually, this is why early EVs sometimes had less legroom or cargo space compared to combustion engine ones. For example, the Nissan Leaf still follows the old philosophy of carrying a motor where you'd normally find an engine. Even aesthetically, EV designs in the past couldn't break away from distinct grille cells and large air vents. But all this is changing. Automakers want their EVs to be unique and stand out, but the only way to do so is to redesign them, and fast. The other factor pushing for faster car redesigns is planned obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is when a company purposely designs a product to become obsolete or lose appeal after a specific period of time. Consumers like to replace items that they deem to be obsolete. That's why car makers help nudge them by purposely making their cars appear outdated or hard to repair after some time. If you haven't seen my detailed video about planned obsolescence, check it out. In the product lifestyle, car companies already have had future model concepts planned years in advance. Now, they don't want to roll out the absolute greatest the very next year. Otherwise, what will they do for the model after that? In other words, milk it while you can. You give consumers something incrementally new and better year after year. Just look at Gillette razors, and you'll see what I mean. Gillette was founded by a man named King Camp Gillette. Yup, that was literally his real name. As a matter of fact, my father wanted to name me King Kilmer, but my mother nixed the idea, which was probably a smart thing. Now, in the 1800s, men's grooming trends were changing rapidly. Long beards were out. Clean chins and cheeks with a well-manicured mustache were in. Believe it or not, men would visit the barbershop 2 to 3 times a week. The other alternative was to try shaving at home. But there weren't as many reliable tools back then as we have now, so it could end up in a catastrophe. Early one morning in a sink, King Camp Gillette realized his permanent blade razor was dull. It required professional sharpening. This frustrated him since he saw that the only necessary part of his blade was the finest part of the tip. There he had his eureka moment. He envisioned a tip on a flattened piece of steel, sharpened on both sides, and his shaving tool would be low-priced and disposable. And that's how Gillette shaving razors were born. That was in 1901. The original Gillette razors came with just one blade. Fast forward almost 100 years to 1998. America saw Gillette razors come with 3 blades. Then jumped to 2005. The world saw the first 5-blade razor called the Gillette Fusion. So there's the gnawing question. Why did it take Gillette more than 100 years to get from 1 blade to 5 blades? Why did they not just add an extra blade every year after they initially founded the company? Well, it's a similar thing with the car industry, or any product maker for that that matter, whether it's an Apple iPhone or MacBook. You don't want to invest all your researches to make one super perfect model. Otherwise, you'll sell one to each consumer and that's it. But rather, it's more strategic to give a consumer regular releases with incremental improvements so that they keep coming back regularly for more. It's a continuous revenue stream. Before the ICE ban, car makers had years of concepts and redesigns planned in each model's life cycle. Think of it as future releases. But as the ICE ban means these new combustion engine cars now will have an expiration date. So it only makes sense that car makers are accelerating releasing these redesigns as much as possible before the ban kicks in and they have to be fully electric. But now you tell me, do you try to follow redesign schedules and updates? Or do you prefer just to buy all new? Do you have a funny or horror experience with planned obsolescence? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for your support.